They once worked together a long time ago. They're not friends now. They don't like each other. And yeah, 50 has taken every shot, especially.
Did you explain why he's speaking out now?
He said he's speaking out because he believes Diddy's a predator. He wants accountability, and he doesn't want someone like this to run unchecked.
They once moved in the same orbits. Two kings from New York, born from different generations, different struggles, but powered by the same relentless engine: ambition. Sean Diddy Combs, the maestro of glamour, the architect of the bad boy empire. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, the survivor from Southside Queens, a man who built a fortress from his own scars. For a moment, their worlds aligned. They collaborated. There was a public respect, the kind required by the business of hip-hop. But beneath the surface, the chemistry was always volatile.
A new Netflix docuseries about Sean Diddy Combs is making headlines for its never-before-seen footage of the music mogul in the days before his arrest.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose
Watch this and think that you really hate Sean Combs.
Two alpha predators sharing the same jungle. The collaboration didn't last. What remained wasn't friendship. It wasn't even professional rivalry. It curdled into something deeper, more personal, a pure, sustained hostility. A Cold War played out in interviews, on social media, in the subtle and not so subtle digs woven into the fabric of the culture. And for years, 50 Cent took his shots. They were barbs, jokes, memes, the digital age equivalent of throwing rocks at a fortress. Annoying, perhaps, damaging, arguably not. The fortress walls, built on decades of power, influence, and meticulously crafted image, seemed impenetrable. But then, something shifted. The shots stopped being for fun. They started aiming for the foundation. When asked why go so hard, why now, 50's answer was stripped of all spectacle.
Well, I'm surprised by the allegations, as surprised as everyone else is. Like, I didn't make the allegations. I didn't tell people to say these things.
The real goal was to storytell. And not everyone needed to have an allegation to be a part of this project.
It was simple, direct, and carried the weight of a mission. This was no longer about hip-hop beef. This was an accusation, a declaration of war not on an artist, but on a man he believed had been shielded by his own mythology for far too long. 50 Cent wasn't just throwing punches anymore. He was laying a trap, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to spring it. That moment arrived not with a bang, but with a leak. The footage at the heart of this earthquake was never meant to see daylight. It was considered, by those who knew of its existence, too explosive, too risky, too dangerous. It was the kind of raw, unfiltered access that empires are built to conceal.
Out in front of this and, tried to persuade Netflix not to come forward with it. I think it's an interesting argument because what they're claiming is, Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent, has had a long-standing, animosity against Diddy and sort of vice versa. And because he's at the helm, they're arguing this can't be taken seriously. This should sort of be seen as propaganda. And one of the things that Netflix hit back with was, yes, he's the executive producer. He doesn't necessarily have creative control.
According to sources, it lived on a hard drive, a digital ghost, a record of the days leading up to Diddy's arrest in September 2024. It was the view behind the velvet rope at the precise moment the rope began to fray. The plan, as understood, was for this footage to be part of a controlled narrative, a documentary of resilience. A comeback story engineered by the man himself, with filmmaker Michael Oberle hired to capture it. It was to be evidence of his control, even in crisis. But control is a fragile illusion. Somewhere between a betrayal from inside Diddy's own inner circle and 50 Cent's patient, calculated pressure, the lock on that digital vault failed. And when it hit the internet, it did not trend. It detonated. No public relations machine, no team of high-powered lawyers, no legacy of power could contain it. The irony was brutal. The cameras he commissioned to protect his image had captured the moments that would damage it most profoundly. The tone was not calm. It was pressure, it was panic.
Put his hands on females, put his hands on producers, executives. That's just his, I guess that's what the whole name bad boy comes from, that people don't really understand. What is it? What is a bad boy? Why did he choose that name? He never really gave a clear definition of how he feels about it.
It was the sound of walls closing in. And then, a smaller, seemingly insignificant moment from the leaked trove went viral. It was a study in contrast that spoke volumes. Polished charm in public. Visible recoil the moment he thought the cameras were off. That contrast, that slip of the mask, resonated with a deep public cynicism. For many, it wasn't just a celebrity being rude. It was a revelation of truth. The bad boy persona stopped feeling like clever marketing and started feeling like a candid warning. This is where the story escalates from a viral leak to a cultural tribunal. 50 Cent, seizing the moment, executive produced a multi-part documentary series for Netflix. This wasn't just a compilation of news clips. It was a narrative weapon, framed not as an investigation, but as a public reckoning, and the prosecutor was his oldest rival. Diddy's legal team moved to kill the project before it aired. They called it executive-produced propaganda.
That I have about the documentary, it was just old news, and they took a couple of with the footage from Puff from the days that's leading up him to get arrested, the incidents with the people from the courts, you know, the two people from the courts. So it was nothing new.
A vendetta dressed up as journalism. They issued cease and desist letters, claiming it was built on stolen footage and private recordings. The battle was on, a fight over narrative, ownership, and truth. But Netflix and director Alexandria Stapleton pushed back. They asserted the footage was obtained legally, and Stapleton made a crucial philosophical point. Diddy spent decades filming himself, building a vast personal archive. He wanted a curated version of behind the scenes. Now, the world was getting the uncut version without his permission. He had documented his own downfall. The series positioned itself as the assembler of a puzzle. It took the leaked footage, wove it together with decades of lawsuits, allegations, and whispered industry stories, and presented a terrifying thesis. This was not a series of isolated incidents. This was systemic. The documentary widened the frame far beyond one leaked tape. It zoomed out to examine the world. Diddy built a world of legendary excess and impenetrable power.
How many people he affected negatively, that was his trade-off to gain what he had. His former bodyguard, Gene Deal, said he seen him doing a ritual where they dub. What is that? And I feel like it's being overlooked because
it showed the iconic white parties, the glamour, the A-list attendees, the Oscars of hip-hop luxury. Then, it contrasted that shine with a darker reality. Police complaint logs from wealthy Hamptons neighbors, interviews with locals who described chaos, noise, and disoriented guests wandering at dawn. Security guards speaking of NDAs and a culture of fear. The series then connected this environment to a stack of civil lawsuits that had been settled, dismissed, or lingered in the press over the years. A claim from the late 1992 involving a minor. A security guard in the mid-2000s who alleged he was drugged and assaulted. A former adult film performer who described being groomed through this party circuit. The documentary's relentless argument was this: the leaked footage of a man panicking about loyalty wasn't an anomaly. It was the behavior of someone who believed the rules, legal, moral, social, did not apply to him. It was the key that made sense of a pattern. And then, the series presented what it framed as the most damning piece of the puzzle. The documentary claims this clip shows Diddy, after showing someone an explicit video from one of his parties, using the threat of exposure as leverage. It's not flirtation, it's not persuasion, it lands with the cold, final sound of control through fear. This clip, more than any rant or panic attack, shifted the public conversation to one word: coercion. And the series argued, if the justice system found claims like Cassie's credible, then moments like this wouldn't be a mistake. They would be evidence of a method. But how did the fortress finally breach?
Diddy, that everybody knows that this footage is now seeing the light of day. Perhaps. What was he intending to use it for?
I have no idea what he was doing that for.
I mean, you know, you're talking about a man who films himself doing everything and has for decades. I think he wanted someone to be behind the scenes with him.
The twist is in the origin story of the leak. Michael Oberle, the hired filmmaker, became a central figure. He didn't claim to be a hero or a whistleblower. In December 2024, he gave an account that was simpler and more Shakespearean: a betrayal of trust. He claimed that while he was out of state for a mere 3 days, someone inside Diddy's trusted inner circle covered for his absence. And in that 72-hour window, the digital archive was accessed. The most damaging material was copied. And then, it was gone. 3 days. That's all it took. Just long enough for an opportunity, whether motivated by money, revenge, or simply the chaotic energy of a sinking ship, to be seized. The material, Oberle implied, was then funneled directly into the hands of 50 Cent's camp. Oberly called it a betrayal. The online world called it karma. And that was perhaps the most devastating conclusion the documentary invited its audience to reach. It wasn't new. The allegations, the stories, the lawsuits, they'd been there for years, floating in the periphery. What was new was the context. The unguarded footage provided the emotional blueprint, the visceral proof of the personality behind the allegations. It turned old news into a damning prelude. The 1st of December 2025. The man once called the most powerful figure in hip-hop was no longer running the game. He was watching the narrative he once controlled flip irreversibly against him from a prison television. The documentary's final point was stark. Diddy didn't just lose a news cycle. He didn't just face legal jeopardy. He lost the one thing his empire was built upon: control. Control of his story. Control of his image. Control of the fear and loyalty that held his world together.
If Sean Combs watches this, what do you think he's going to feel?
Like, wow, this is amazing. I think he's going to say this is the best documentary I've seen in a long time.
Was there anything that surprised you when you were watching?
I think it was surprising that he actually filmed it. That's one of the moments where you forget.
He wanted to be a legend. He documented everything to ensure it. And in the end, that documentation, weaponized by a rival and unleashed by a betrayal, became the engine of his own unraveling. The bad boy built the archive. His enemies used it to write his final chapter. Beyond the leaked footage and the legal arguments lies the quiet, human wreckage. The documentary forces a brutal calculus. Look at how many people were allegedly affected, hurt, or silenced. What was the trade-off for the empire? For the fame, the yacht parties, the bad boy legacy? The series doesn't just present accusers. It zooms in on the environment that made it all possible. It features testimonies like that of former bodyguard Gene Deal, who describes a culture far removed from the glamorous music videos. Trained. It's a chilling word. It suggests a system, a molding of behavior that extended beyond performance into something more insidious. The documentary contrasts this behind-the-scenes reality with the public facade, the shiny, celebratory music videos implying that the two were inseparable parts of the same machine. And then it cuts back to the most damning evidence of all, Diddy's own documented unraveling. This isn't a CEO managing a crisis. This is the sound of a man feeling the bedrock of his reality control turning to sand beneath his feet.
Protect everybody's phone. So now it's just your word against a billionaire. You're gonna lose. Read this right there.
Where Diddy said to her, he testified that he showed her a video of a freak-off that she participated in and said, if you don't participate in another freak-off when we get to New York, I'm gonna put this video out. I'm gonna send it to your mother.
It's panic, captured in real time. The invincibility, gone. As the documentary detonated, the industry reaction was a fault line revealing deep splits. Some circled the wagons, attacking the messenger. Others offered vague warnings about karma, only to be swiftly reminded of their own proximity to the world being exposed. The most potent reaction, however, came from those who argued the documentary's true target was never just one man. It was the ecosystem. And that is where the conversation gets dangerous for the powerful. It stops being about the fall of a king and becomes about the exposure of the kingdom. Empires built on silence only survive as long as the people inside them stay quiet. And right now, that silence is not just broken, it's shattered. The dam isn't cracking, it has collapsed. In this avalanche of revelation, one name is pulled back into the spotlight with a haunting persistence: Kim Porter. Her tragic passing in 2018 was officially ruled as natural causes by the Los Angeles County coroner. A private, devastating loss. But in the shadow of this documentary, the internet's old whispers have found a megaphone.
The book Porter allegedly recounts discovering and making copies of the tapes that Diddy made of himself having with young boys that he was managing, including an alleged tape involving an 18-year-old pop star.
The series doesn't make accusations. It leans into the unsettling tension. It asks the question hovering in the public mind. What did she know? What might she have had access to during her years at the heart of this world? Her name resurfaces not because the documentary provides answers, but because it makes the question feel more urgent. In a story about control, secrets, and leverage, the fate of the woman who was once the closest to the center becomes a profound and unresolved mystery. Her absence is a silence that speaks volumes. The legal front is now a battlefield. Lawsuits are piling up like siege weapons against a crumbling castle. Former employees, producers, associates, people who were once paid for their loyalty or silenced by it are now in open legal warfare. This isn't just about justice anymore. In the public eye, it's being framed as payback, as restitution for a debt incurred by fear. That threat, your word against a billionaire, was the foundational economics of the old system. The documentary argues that equation has now flipped. The word of the vulnerable, amplified by leaked tapes and a changed cultural climate, now carries a weight that billions in hush money can't easily suppress. People are rewriting their roles, flipping loyalties, trying to land on the right side of history before the door slams shut forever. It's a stampede for the exits. But what truly has the powerful shaking isn't what's been shown, it's what hasn't. The documentary plants a terrifying idea. Diddy has been filming obsessively since he was 19. Every party, every meeting, every private moment, an archive of an entire era. If that is on tape, a moment of alleged coercion used as leverage, then the most frightening question shifts.
For granted, he never thought that she'll leave her. So it's like both hands clapping together. You cannot clap with one hand. The both hands like this, then you get...
I'm about to deposit $200 million right now. I feel good.
It's no longer do tapes exist, it's who else is on them. Friends, artists, executives, people who laughed along, played along, and looked the other way. A tape isn't just a scandal, it's leverage. And the documentary hints at even darker possibilities within this archive. The question becomes existential. How far will people go to keep those recordings buried? How much money will be thrown at this silence? And what happens when someone decides the price of silence, moral, legal, spiritual, is no longer worth paying? Power only lasts as long as people are willing to enforce it. And the enforcers are now breaking ranks. When Roger Bonds, a man paid to be a human shield, breaks down on camera and suggests, it wasn't only Sean, it was bigger. A network, it sends a seismic shock through the narrative. If the man tasked with protection is talking about a network, it forces the world to wonder, who are the other nodes? The assistants who scheduled the parties? The road managers who handled the talent? The artists who left Bad Boy with stories swallowed by NDAs? They are the real shift. The documentary ends, but their reckoning is just beginning. This is the chilling, pervasive question hanging in the air. Diddy didn't build this world alone. The white parties were industry events. The culture involved too many enablers, too many beneficiaries. So when federal authorities raided homes connected to Diddy in 2024, the industry didn't just see a mogul in trouble. They saw a file cabinet. What names were in those files? What emails? What contracts? What guest lists? How many powerful people are sweating right now, wondering if their past compliance is about to become public testimony? This story was never only about Diddy. It's about the end of an era of untouchable fame, an era where the rules were written by and for the people at the top. But now, the rulebook has been thrown out the window. So where are we now? A mogul in custody, a family navigating a nightmare of their own, an entire industry holding its breath, conducting quiet audits of their own pasts, footage that has rewritten the public memory, and the unshakable belief that more exists recordings that could burn the last remnants of a legacy to ash. Artists who once clamored for a Bad Boy feature are scrubbing old social media posts. Fans are listening to classic anthems with a new, uncomfortable awareness. The music remains, but the myth behind it is fatally wounded. This documentary gave us answers, but it left far bigger questions. What happens when the last loyalist flips? When the final NDA expires? When the next hard drive emerges from the shadows? Make no mistake, people believe more is coming. And if this much surfaced while he still had influence and resources, imagine what could surface now that he doesn't. So I'm asking you, how deep do you think this really goes? Are we watching the fall of one man, or the unraveling of an entire system built on silence, fear, and control? This is about more than celebrity gossip. It's a case study in power, accountability, and what happens when the facade finally shatters. Drop your theories in the comments. I want to know what you think. Remember, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and never ever ignore the secrets people fight the hardest to keep buried. Because sometimes, the fight to bury them is what finally brings them to light. We are just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.